right? You need to hire one pool of data scientists and one pool of analytics BI folks, right? And then be able to essentially offer the service across the board in the company. The data ownership boundaries are not as significant or severe as in the previous model, right? Because you say, okay, you own your data, but I'm going to get a copy, read-only copy of it, and you have a clear sense of boundaries of ownership in that case. One of the biggest costs here in doing this is data migration projects, right? And this is, again, a lot of companies underestimate the amount of data migration projects that they have to accomplish. So for example, Citibank is doing a consolidated data lake project, and the data migration aspect of it is it's going to cost them $2 billion, right, globally. Huge project, right? So those costs are often underestimated. And then obviously organizational changes, right? When you have organizational changes, you have kind of collateral changes that you have to take care of as well. So that's kind of the maturity model from a organizational point of view. So, all right, so that's really all I have. Is, at the end of the day, baby steps, right? Walk before run is what it means, and it's important to set the right expectations to executive management. There are too many analytics projects, too many Hadoop projects that I've seen that companies embark on because it's going to look great on their resumes, but they kind of stall because they're not being able to tie it back to business outcomes. That's all I had.
Now open to questions.
And by the way, I'm an immigrant too, but I don't have that cool T-shirt, so. Yeah.
Hey, I have a question about the maturity model that you just showed.
Yeah.
So the proposal of your evolution is to centralize. One challenge that may happen when you centralize is that the data scientists become an ivory tower full of data scientists and far away from the business. And I think part of the value of the data scientist is understanding how the business works well. How do you address that type of problem in an organization? And is this problem much bigger if the organization is large?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? So whenever you centralize a function, you always get into the siloed effect, right? The centralized organization becomes an ivory tower. They're a different organization. So there are a couple of ways to do it, right? So I've seen in organizations where you have representatives from each of those business units, also part of that team. They may not be an expert data scientist, but they attend those meetings and then they give constant feedback and provide the checks and balances. I've also seen where the data science guy is expected to essentially do like a sabbatical, right? Maybe some part of the folks there actually go work with some of these organizations, understand what the business issues are at a one-on-one level as opposed to sitting on an ivory tower and kind of driving it that way. So I've seen it both ways, but again, it takes an organizational will and planning to be able to do that. But yeah, absolutely. The larger the team, the more issues you're going to have of having that ivory tower effect.
So what you just said, your presentation resonates very well with me, so thank you very much for that. One of the things you said right at the very end was you've seen a lot of the big projects, a lot of these big data projects not being able to be tied to business value. In my experience, because of the nature of the big data projects, because they're overarching, they have so many different business cases that they can fulfill. It's a little hard sometimes to target in on the business side. Can you speak a little bit in your experience about how you've been successful with that?
Absolutely, absolutely. So it very much has to do with this, actually. So, and oftentimes, the companies they want to build a data lake and then start looking at use cases to go fetch, right? So typically it's been kind of an IT-led engagement. What we've done from us, when I was running services, and even with Dell EMC, when we offer these solutions, we often approach the lines of business and try to nail down some use cases for them. At least 2 use cases, not 1, but 2 use cases. Okay? Because one use case, you don't need a platform. You need a vertically integrated solution, and off you go, off you run. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Analytics has existed a long time before Hadoop or any of these technologies came along. So you need at least 2 use cases. And they have to have sponsorship from the line of business. So you go talk to the line of business, get sponsorship for 2 use cases, and then you implement only the scope of those 2 use cases on your Hadoop data lake. And then you expand from that. So the syndrome where you have a data lake and you're fishing out for use cases is kind of the tail wagging the dog, if you will. And it really speaks to the fact that you're lacking the discipline of taking that first step, right, on the left-hand side there.
I just want to ask, if someone wants to switch their career into data science,
Right.
how they get started? Because
Yeah.
if you don't have work is experience, you don't get experience, you don't get job.
Right. Great question. Chicken and egg problem, right? So the first thing you do is to get exposed to other data scientists, right? So if you have a team, so typically if you look at any kind of services engagement for advanced analytics projects, you have 1 or 2 data scientists, right? You don't have a lot of them, right? 1 or 2 guys, and then you have a bunch of BI folks who are really good at slicing and dicing data, writing OLAP queries and stuff like that. You have a few architects who put together the stack for you and who integrate with other IT systems, right? And then you have the infrastructure guys who do the hardware, rack and stack configuration, those kind of things. So it depends on where you are, right? You could be any one of those other guys that wants to do data science, right? Or you could be, for example, you have a computer science degree. Well, you could be a big data architect, right? Who understands how to configure these Hadoop stacks or SAS or Splunk or whatever analytics stacks you have. So you could start off there. And then you have to essentially, it's kind of like an osmosis thing, right? You start working more and more with the data science guys, understand what their ways of working are, what the best practices are from them. On the alternative, in parallel, what you'll have to do is to actually get the core capabilities, right? You have to, so statistics, right? Analytical models, you need to have an understanding of that. If you look at the evolution of software, right? I was a computer science graduate from way back when. I wrote assembly code, I wrote low-level code, and then I kind of switched over to the business side just when people started only using Java, right? So I never actually learned to program in Java. So a similar type of evolution is happening in the data science industry, right? So I talked about how back in '93 we were doing nonlinear PCA algorithms. Well, we were actually hard-coding our algorithms on connection machines, okay? And today, there are a ton of startup companies and even mature companies that are basically data science for dummies type tools, right? Those tools are great because you don't need to understand how the algorithms work in a very detailed way to be able to implement some of these projects. On the flip side, you may run into issues that you will not be able to get out of, right? It's like the initial days of Java, right? Where people didn't really understand garbage collection. And they're like, why is my program stuck in, right? And I'm doing everything right. Well, there are things that are happening under the covers that you're not aware of. So the industry is kind of in that phase of evolution right now where you still need to understand the concepts of statistics, for probabilistic models and stuff like that, even if you use those tools. Okay? And the vendors of the tools will tell you that they can get anybody on the street and just give them the tool and they'll be a data scientist. That's not really the case.
Sign. One question.
Yeah.
I authored 2 books on IoT,
Okay.
and my experience from semiconductor business before I transitioned here showed me that one of the principal reasons ROIs are low in the industry is because of poor or diminishing consumer purchasing power of people. So industry also has to take, because this is the consideration that for the IoT to become a revolution, supply and demand both have to grow. So unless that aspect of economics is addressed, I don't know how we'll have an ROIs when we just can just manufacture as much as we can, but we're not finding sufficient consumption.
Right. So the ROI model that I talked about was more of a typical IT, BI, analytics practice in any run-of-the-mill company, right? When you're talking about IoT devices and IoT type use cases, the ROI equation kind of changes, right? Because then you're absolutely right. It's a question of how do you balance supply and demand. I think in a way that question is can also be asked as what are the compelling IoT use cases where the returns are meaningful to warrant the investment, right? So that supply and demand question, I think, matching that up is similar to the ROI question in terms of, I would probably categorize that as kind of more the revenue column, right? Even though you're talking about, so actually that's a great point. I mean, you could actually use the same taxonomy for IoT devices too, right? And IoT use cases. You can say, okay, what are the IoT use cases, say in manufacturing or heavy machinery, automotive, that represent cost savings for me? How much is the cost savings for doing proactive maintenance on heavy machinery, for instance, or any of these things, or fraud detection, right? And you could have revenue type use cases. So I think that particular model you could actually apply to IoT use cases, not just for enterprise IT use cases.
Yes, coming to the return of investment again, if you go back to the slide, the most important thing, which is again, I mean, as you told, is the life cycle costs which are playing in anywhere in the project. So many of the customers whom we speak just ask, okay, will I get some ROI this year?
Right.
If I implement 2017, at the end of 2017, will I see? And we all know that implementing big data projects or something takes time.
Right.
And then we say, oh, the answer is anywhere not closer to that, because it takes X number of hours or time to build even that use case to get into reality and
Right.
predictive model. It's all the learning curve there.
Right.
So is there a kind of a benchmark, we say, typically 24 months life cycle, which will help you to get ROI closer to what we have seen there? Or should I say that, okay, it's like again the old way of doing BI, where you have bottom up and top down approach,
Right.
both were playing.
Right.
Somebody was saying you want to ROI, get to the bottom up approach. Somebody was saying you want an enterprise warehouse, build a top down approach.
Right. So from a time frame perspective, I mean, obviously a lot depends on use cases, but typical expectation is don't pick use cases where you cannot justify an ROI within 6 months. If you're thinking of use cases where you say, okay, I'm going to have great ROI in 18 months, chunk that up, right? Split it up, because that's the tolerance level for a lot of the management teams, is 6 months.
From a business leader perspective and also a tech type guy, would you try to maximize more revenue generation or cost and risk mitigation?
Cost.
In what case where do you see in the future? Because from a business leader perspective, you want to generate probably more revenue, but let's say as a software engineer, you want to try and do more cost saving.
Right.
So where would you say, what do you want to maximize more of?
Right. So absolutely great question. So from a business leader point of view, they're looking at risk, right? Risk mitigation overall for the business, okay? While they're investing. Oftentimes, business leaders want to get returns on one engagement and then use that returns to then funnel growth. That's how most business leaders think, right? So a lot of business leaders are looking at this and saying, okay, let me fund the cost and risk mitigation projects. Let's get the ROI in place, and from that ROI, I'm going to go ahead and fund revenue generation projects. Kind of a bootstrap, right? Instead of putting in money from outside the pond, you're actually generating revenues, and then you're repurposing those, or cost savings, and repurposing those cost savings to then build more advanced technologies. One more question, maybe? All right. One more question.
In your experience, I'm a consultant, and so I'd like from your experience, some of the things, what are some of the language you would use maybe to persuade the board into some of these technologies that is not overbearing, that is not like going to drown them and stuff that they don't know and they're confused about, and immediately that triggers the fear, that triggers that I don't want to go there. In your experience, what are some of the things that, or some of the resources we can look into so we can share that with them?
Okay. So, unfortunately, I mean, there are a few books and resources that have started to surface. I've been to a lot of the Hadoop conferences over the last 6-7 years, and the first few years I thought it was a joke, because it's like there's no talk or discussion about any of the business or use cases. It was all about technology and Flume and Spark and these kind of things. So I think that is maturing. You're starting to see more and more material come up on these kind of the business discussions. I would put all your business discussions I would articulate them in terms of these kind of things, right? ROI, NPV, net present value of whatever project you're going to engage on, right? A time frame for returns, like the 6-month time frame is really a good psychological barrier for a lot of management folks. So I don't think there's any kind of secret sauce to any of this, right? It's like any other new engagement where you have to explain it in terms that they understand, and just business terms in general. And the key thing to emphasize is you need to be able to take the predictive models and then build it out into cost savings models, right? And oftentimes you can actually go in there and you can say, okay, I predict the return on investment to be between this and this, right? Which oftentimes the business leaders are like, okay, you've done your homework. Think of confidence intervals for those of you guys who've done statistics, right? You have the 5% confidence interval, right? Same thing here.
Okay, great.
Thank you.